Thanks for staying with us, everyone, for a special coverage on May 29, the first-year anniversary of Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Nigeria is also celebrating 25 years of unbroken democratic rule. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm joined by Managing Director of the Nigeria Education Loan Fund, Akintunde Sawyer. Mr. Sawyer, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And happy unbroken democracy to you.
Absolutely.
So there are a lot of talks about what has happened between 24th of May when that portal was launched, right?
Yes.
And now, perhaps we want to begin with that. What has it been like? What's the kind of feedback you're getting?
It's been very interesting. So, as you can imagine, we've launched a portal that enables people to go in, enter their details, and then hope that they will get some sort of financial succor.
When you say hope, so not everyone who applies get the loan?
So absolutely not. No. Unfortunately, clearly we can only give the loan to people who are eligible. So there's some criteria that essentially establishes eligibility. But what I can tell you is that it's very, very soft in terms of what is required. And so many people will get the loan.
Run us through those criteria very quickly.
Okay, all right. So the law requires this loan to be given to Nigerians. So Nigerian citizens, and the way we establish that is by having a national identification number. Another criteria is that clearly this is about education, certainly at this phase. Education into tertiary institutions, which requires you to have a JAM number. So if you don't have that, unfortunately, you won't be eligible. That also cross-checks through to the institution.
Okay, so I don't think anyone can get to, if they don't have a JAM number. Some people don't write JAM to get to universities.
This is true. However, in this case, what we're encouraging people to do is to go and write their JAM, because this is a major requirement.
So without writing JAM, you can access the loan?
Without having a JAM number, unfortunately, you can't access the loan for the stage.
Why so, though?
Well, I think
do you think that captures, do you think more Nigerian students wrote JAM before they got to school? Have you done that math to know whether you're not disenfranchising a tangible number of Nigerian students?
So the data that we have tells us that most students have written JAM. However, we recognize that some haven't, and we're encouraging those who haven't to go and do so. This is a long-term program. It's about education. We've got to get it right from the beginning.
You mean even as an undergraduate, you can still go back to write it? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the eligibility criteria is that you must have JAM. So, yes, of course, you can go back to write JAM. If you're in a tertiary institution, a university, a polytechnic, a college of education, then really you should have a JAM number. That's what the criteria that has been set requires, because we can't make this an open-ended thing. It's got to be something that's driven by criteria and eligibility. And so that has to be. Just to add to the other eligibility criteria you talked about, BVN, so again, people must be financially included. They must be able to pay the loan back through a proper financial system. And then they should be properly registered, either to gain admission into a tertiary institution, or they should already be there with what you said earlier, a JAM number. Absolutely critical.
So you have to be a Nigerian, you must be a student, it's an education loan, you need a JAM number, BVN.
Yes.
Do you need NIN as well?
Yes, of course. That's the demonstration that you're a Nigerian. So if you have an NIN, that actually proves your citizenship of the great nation Nigeria.
Doesn't sound difficult anyways from the way it looks here. But the first phase we understand is strictly for students of government-owned tertiary institutions?
Yes,
right?
so actually the law requires us only to provide these loans for those in state-owned, government-owned tertiary institutions. Now, the President, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, has indicated that he would like to see this extended to all Nigerian citizens. The law as it sits today only allows us to offer these loans to those who are.
So you will have to go back to the National Assembly to review.
We would have to go back, because they're the ones who can change the law. They hold the powers to change the law in Nigeria. We would have to go back. But we're not there yet. What we're doing at the moment is we're rolling this out in phases. So we're going to start, or we have started, with the federal institutions, We're gathering data for the state-owned institutions. And then when we've done this and been able to learn exactly how this can best work and the funds that are at our disposal, we can then begin to talk to the National Assembly, perhaps at some point in the future, about extending it. But it's not ruled out. But for this phase, we just need to ensure that we implement this properly, fairly, equitably, and within the law.
How long is this first phase?
So we estimate that in 3 months, we'll be able to roll this out to state institutions.
Okay.
Now, the way this works is that it's entirely online. So you don't need to know anybody, you don't need to interface with anybody. Essentially, you go into the system and it verifies all the details that I spoke about earlier. And the final check is to establish that you're in fact in an institution. That requires some sort of handshake and collaboration with the existing institutions, the universities, the colleges of education, the polytechnics. Currently at federal level, we're busy gathering data for the state institutions and cleaning the data that we have for the federal institutions so that we get to a point where it's completely seamless.
And this is good because this is where some will find out that they're actually they do not have substantive admission into schools because, when we're in school, a lot of that happened in the final year. But we're also hearing that you're having issues with some federal tertiary schools who are yet to upload data of their students on the dashboard. What's that about?
So that's really about, communication. So, we've obviously communicated to the schools. They have their own internal systems and responsibilities. Remember that a lot of them haven't had to do this before. So they're going through a process of cleaning their data, making sure it's accurate, and then making sure that somebody within the institution is responsible for uploading the data onto the platform that we have created. So I don't want to throw stones, I don't want to cast aspersions, I don't want to get into a blame game, but clearly we are working very closely with them and they're also cooperating very well with us, and our hope is that very soon we'll be able to get all the data and clean data.
Is that hindering the processing of the application in any way?
Yeah, of course, because it's entirely data-driven. If there's no data there, no loan application can be confirmed. If there's data there and there's a digit wrong or a numeric digit wrong or an alphabet wrong within the various numbers that we're requiring, then again that's going to cause problems. But you find this with every IT-driven project in the world.
Absolutely.
Data must be absolutely there and it must be absolutely accurate.
You try to make it sound easy, but it can also pose a major limitation or hindrance to what you're doing. For instance, if a student's data is not on this dashboard, how does that individual proceed in his or her application?
Okay. So look, one of the things we've done is that we've put in a proper ticketing system, which means that if you have any issues proceeding with your application, then you can come to us and we will troubleshoot and identify where the issue is and then share that information with the student or with the institution to ensure that that is corrected. These are natural teething problems with any IT-driven project. You will encounter issues. It's just about how you escalate, how you ticket, how you ensure that you have proper reporting, and then how you fix the problem.
So in 3 months, this is expected to get to state universities?
That's our expectation. So as I said, we're very busy gathering a lot of information from 50-odd state institutions just to ensure that we have the data and all the students that they have either coming in or already registered. And we think that that process will take about 3 months.
What about those who are willing to acquire vocational skills and qualification?
Okay, so that's a phase that we're not going to really kick off until about 6 or 7 months down the line, and I'll tell you why. A lot of the people, not all of them, a lot of the people who wish to acquire vocational enhancement, if you like, or studies, from our research, are largely currently unbanked. Some of them don't have NINs, some of them don't have some of the basic requirements. For example, JAM would not work in that group of people. And it's a much larger group of people. So we're having to work really from scratch to see how we can identify these people, bring them into the financial system, bring them into the formal recognized identity system. That's going to take quite a bit of doing. But actually we think that that's worthwhile because that's really where the biggest impact will be felt in a country as large as ours. And the President in his wisdom added this to our portfolio And we're very excited to be in the throes of doing this now, but that's going to take some more time because we have to gather the data.
Do we have an idea the number of students we have as we speak? And so I'm just concerned about this loan is not meant for everyone, right? If you can afford your education, you're not supposed to apply. Do you think that is a message that is out there?
Well, yes, I think it's a message that's out there. I think you're going to find that, so first of all, let me deal with the numbers that you asked for. We think there are about 1.8, 1.9 million.
In tertiary institutions?
In tertiary institutions.
Both federal and state?
Well, yes, federal and state.
Okay.
The numbers that are in the federal institutions, about 1.2 million. Okay. So we kind of have an understanding of the numbers of people who are potentially going to apply. It's worth remembering that within those numbers are foreign students. So there's some students from abroad who actually study in Nigerian institutions. So we have a sense of the numbers, of the total numbers. However, we recognize that not everybody will want the loan. We recognize that, not everybody who wants the loan is prepared to take, the stipend, for example, because there are 2 tracks. But we expect a lot more applications than people in the educational system because people, there's pent-up demand. People want to try just to see if they can get it. But unfortunately, some of them may be disappointed because there is a process that we must follow. And that process, I think, gives us a cap.
Well, this process doesn't show whether you need the money or not, right?
Right, so that's a good point. I think one of the things that we're trying to do, and if you remember I said we asked for the BVN. One of the things that we are asking students is to give us an indication of their level of need. Okay? In this country today, it's quite difficult to determine who has savings, who hasn't. And that's one of the reasons we're looking at the BVN, because that gives us an indication of who's banked.
So you're going to be spying into people's accounts?
Well, spying is probably too harsh a word to use. However, it's in our best interest to protect taxpayers' money, to ensure that we're not handing out money to people who don't need it, and therefore depriving those who do of having access to those funds. We have to be sure, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we give these funds to people who really need it, not to those who are just trying.
Okay, so someone who has a millionaire in their account is not likely going to get this loan?
Well, the truth about it is that how much are these loans? These loans are, 200, 300, 400,000 for, institutional fees. If you have ₦1 million in your account, there's probably going to be some explanation for you having it there, but we would rather give these loans to people who have 100 naira in their accounts than to people who have ₦1 million in their accounts. You can imagine that, it's a moving line, and we've got to be sure that we're not discriminating against somebody just because they have money in their account. They might be able to account for it in a particular way. It may not be regular funds, but clearly what we're looking at is those who are getting regular funding from whatever source are less likely to be eligible for this than those who are really hard up and are able to really tell where their next session fees are going to come from.
How much does each student get, and does it cover for accommodation, feeding, and every other expenses you will need as a student?
Okay, so the good news around this is that we will cover 100% of the institutional fees.
Okay.
So whatever the institution charges the student, if the loan is approved for that individual, we'll cover that 100%. In terms of the stipend, that is going to be a figure that will be determined by a number of things. One, your means. Secondly, perhaps where you're studying. There might be a greater requirement for you to have more funds if you're in an inner city institution than if you're in a rural institution. The student themselves may say, look, I only want a proportion of the stipend. So this will be determined based on information that they provide us. We'll have an algorithm that will give us a view on what Mr. Nifemi perhaps should get vis-a-vis Mr. Sawyer. So we're looking at it carefully. That is a variable figure on that side. But on the side of the access to education, the institutional charges, we are going to pay 100% without option.
Sounds good. Does a single application means that you get the loan throughout your stay in school, or you have to apply again for another session?
Okay, thank you for that question, and it's important that I clarify this. The fact that you gain admission in the first year doesn't mean you will remain in the same institution or in the same course for the second year. So this is done on the basis of a yearly application. You know, students, sadly, all kinds of things happen to people in their first year. Some die, some suffer a debilitating illness, some are involved in accidents that stop them from being able to proceed or proceed for a period of time. In that case, we can probably halt the loan if it's a temporary stop, and then they can apply again. What is interesting about what we're doing is that once you register for the loan, you create an account with an L fund. Once that account is created, all that you require for the loan for the next session is really to demonstrate that you have passed through to the following year and that the institution has registered you to go into the second level or the third level or the fourth level or the 500 level. It's essential that this is done yearly because, again, we have to protect the funds, which belongs to the taxpayer, and we've got to make sure that we're only giving it to people who are perhaps not professionals.
And you're confident this process will be seamless?
We are confident that this process will be seamless. What we are trying to do is ensure that there's no human interface. We're trying to ensure that you don't need to know anybody, you don't need to be special in society to an individual. We're trying to eliminate graft. So one of the things we've done with the new, or when the President retransmitted this act to the House earlier on this year, is to try and take out the requirement for gateways, gatekeepers, graft, guarantors, so that the process can be seamless electronically.
So you don't need a guarantor?
No, you don't need a guarantor at all.
How do you now ensure the payback?
Well, so the payback obligation is going to rest where applicants or loanees are employed. It's going to sit with the employer. So the employer is going to have to reference a site that will give an indication as to whether that individual that they're about to employ has a loan or not. If they do, then the obligation, the legal obligation, is on the employer to ensure that deductions are made and transferred directly to offset the loan. In the case of loanees who become self-employed, they make a declaration to the effect that as soon as they are able to start paying back, in other words, as soon as they become profitable and are able to pay themselves a salary, they will pay a certain percentage back to the loan fund. It's really important that I make this clarification. This scheme does not seek to penalize applicants.
Defaulters.
It doesn't. However, it will do if the defaulter has lied or told an untruth in whilst they're applying for the loan, or if the employer fails to carry out the proper checks or fails to make the remittances back into the loan fund. So self-employed people need to be a little bit careful. Employers need to be very focused on understanding, that actually they have an obligation to play to return taxpayers' money.
We're definitely going to talk more about this. It sounds like you're putting a lot of trust in the ability of Nigerians to do what is right, and hope you don't get your fingers burnt.